Hi, thank you so much for joining us this evening. It's so wonderful to hold this webinar on drip irrigation basics with Oscar Lucario tonight. Thank you so much for being here. We are going to wait a few minutes to get going. And while people are joining us, I would love to see you share some of your favorite irrigation anecdotes in the chat function. Some of you may have heard this before, this phrase that irrigation can be irritation, which is why many of you are probably here tonight, because a well-planned and well-maintained irrigation system can be such a tool for water conservation, and frustrations and kind of funny stories often arise as well. So we would love to hear see some of your irrigation anecdotes in that chat while people are trickling in. We would also love to know where you are joining us from this evening. So you can go ahead and put your location too, and that helps us get a good picture of everybody that's here with us tonight. And again, thank you so much for joining this evening for our drip irrigation basics with Oscar Lucario. We are so happy that you are here tonight joining us.
You're welcome.
Okay, seeing a lot of participants from Santa Rosa, some from Petaluma.
There's some from San Diego as well, you know? Yes, it's interesting.
Welcome everyone. We are so happy you're here with us tonight. We're just going to wait a few more moments before we get started. And if you're just joining us, if you see, or if you would like to share with us some of your funny irrigation anecdotes or frustrating moments that you may have had that caused a splash, we'd love to hear about those. I keep on saying speak, but I mean share in your chat. Somebody asked, do you want us to share in chat or speak? So please share in the chat.
I gotta tell you guys, it's really fun. Once you get going, you pass the fear and you familiarize with all the small items and things we have. It becomes pretty fun. So you'll have more stories after this. Hoping you learn a few things today and then you put them to practice and they'll give you stories. So hang on.
Serena says that one time she unscrewed a solenoid completely and started a mini geyser. Lindy says that she can put in a goof plug and insert a little dripper, but can't fix a big gusher. I think Oscar will have some tips and tricks for you this evening.
Oh my goodness, a good set of pliers that always in your toolbox, and fun things.
All right, we are going to go ahead and get started this evening. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Oops, sorry. My name is Annie Silverman. I'm a senior programs coordinator with Daily Acts. For those of you that aren't familiar with Daily Acts, we are a holistic education, ecological education nonprofit whose mission is to inspire transformative action that creates connected, equitable, and climate resilient communities. We are here tonight in partnership with the City of Santa Rosa, and we are hosting a series of 4 webinars this year. This is the second of our series of 4, and stay tuned for the end of the presentation where I will share our upcoming 2 webinars with you that we hope you'll be able to join us for. Before we get going, I would like to go over some Zoom etiquette. If a question arises during our presentation, please use the question box down below. If something seems relevant to answer immediately, I will let Oscar know. All other questions will be saved for our discussion after the presentation. If you'd like to add resources or ideas, please use the chat box. Part of what I love about these webinars and what makes them such a rich learning environment is that so many of you are experts yourselves, and your insights and your comments are so fun to read through and are part of what makes this a really wonderful learning environment. So please do use that chat box for your comments and anecdotes. We will be recording this presentation and we will make it available to you in the follow-up email. So without further ado, I would like to pass it over to Deb Lane with the City of Santa Rosa.
Hi, Annie. Can you hear me and see me?
Yes, can hear you and see you.
Terrific. Well, how wonderful to be here with all of you, and thank you all for joining us. We're thrilled to be partnering with Daily Acts on this workshop series and to be offering this particular workshop in such a timely point in history with what we're dealing with this drought. And so I wanted to lead off with a bit of an update on the current water supply levels and talk to you about what's going on with the drought. You can see here on the slide that's showing that we have received 38% of our average rainfall to date in Santa Rosa. You can see Ukiah as well with the upper river communities. And we have 2 lakes that where our water supply comes from, Lake Sonoma and Lake Mendocino. And you can see they are very low in what we would want to be hoping for right now in July with a 50% in Lake Sonoma and about 35% in Lake Mendocino. Our watershed is experiencing what may become the driest period ever, but we can do our part to preserve and extend our water supply through this dry period. And being on this workshop is webinar is going to really help you learn how to do that in the landscaping realm. Next slide, please. So our water, you can see here that these are pictures, and these were actually taken, probably at least 4 to 5 weeks ago. I can't imagine what it's looking like right now. You can see Lake Mendocino on the top picture there, and at the bottom is Lake Sonoma. Lake Mendocino supplies water to our upper river communities, and it's basically Healdsburg North. And then Lake Sonoma, which is a much bigger lake, has a several year supply, is supplying all of the communities south, including Santa Rosa. So we're very low, extremely low. We all know that. And I also wanted to point out that on the right-hand side, you can see these free lawn signs that we are offering. We have plenty of them. I'll give you more information of where to come pick them up and where to get more information. But for anyone in the city of Santa Rosa in our area, you are welcome to have a free yard sign to put out in your beautiful low water use landscape with your excellent drip irrigation and help us get the word out. So if we move into the next slide, I'll explain a little bit of where we are right now. On June 29th, the city of Santa Rosa adopted stage 3 of our water shortage contingency plan. And so this is a mandatory 20% reduction in water use, and it includes some water restrictions and prohibitions. On this slide, you see our, oh, let's go back. You can see the website here, srcity.org/savewater. If you want more information, grab that site and watch that as we keep it updated throughout what's going on throughout this drought. And there's a lot of good information and more detail on how we arrived at this point. And in addition to these restrictions and prohibitions, we're also asking residents to eliminate water waste and to adopt water conserving behaviors. You know, we're all in this together, and it's important that we try and make every drop count. So check out that website for more information as we move forward. Let me tell you a little bit more about some of the specific restrictions that have now been enacted, and particularly when it pertains to landscape, since this is an outdoor webinar, we're talking about drip irrigation. Next slide, please. So using potable water for washing hard surfaces like your sidewalks and your driveways and your patios is prohibited. It's not allowed at this point moving forward until we're through this drought period. So use a broom instead to save water and get your surfaces clean. Next slide. Pressure washing with potable water is also prohibited, except for health and public safety. And this pertains more in the commercial realm, but unless a variance is obtained, you're not allowed to do it. And that can be done through Santa Rosa Water. You can go to our website that I give you information at the end of this to ask about some kind of a variance in order to pressure wash. It is like prepping, pressure washing your house. If you already have a contractor scheduled to paint your house, that you can get a variance for that. And then anything else will really be limited to probably mostly commercial sites for health and safety. Next slide, please. Water waste due to breaks, leaks, or excess is prohibited. This includes indoor leaks from faucets, appliances, as well as outdoor leaks from irrigation. I will tell you that this is always prohibited. The city of Santa Rosa has a water waste ordinance, and it is illegal to actually waste water. And that there are definitions in city code what that means, and it's water that's running onto sidewalks and into our gutters. And we actually have the ability to go as far as shutting water off for a customer if they're not complying with the ordinance. And I say that, but I'll tell you that we do everything we can to help the customer. We have a very strong program. We are all technically very strong and work with our customers to help them in these situations. But it's always actually against the law to waste water in the city of Santa Rosa. Next slide. And then hose and shutoff nozzles are also required for all hoses. And I will let you know that we're giving those away to City of Santa Rosa residents, water customers. So I'll give you more information about that, but no longer can, and it's always a good best practice to have a hose end shutoff nozzle on your hoses. You never know what's going to happen, and you just want that extra protection there so something doesn't run on and you leave it unattended and you forget about it, etc. And then I think we have, one more slide here on the mandatory drought restrictions, and that's an important one for this class, is that landscape irrigation is limited to the hours of 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. So if you have an irrigation controller and you're programming it to automatically water your landscape, make sure you take a look at what time you've got it going off, because we want to keep that happening during the evening when we're not getting the sunshine and the radiant heat. And we want to make sure and limit those hours, and that's actually required now. So that's an important one to pay attention to. I want to move into, for the last couple of slides here, and tell you about our program and the ways that we are able to help you save water in your home or your business. We've got a long-standing commitment to water use efficiency. You can see this list of rebates and incentives. We have both residential or commercial free checkups. And right now we're doing virtual indoor. We're not changing that right away. That will probably change later in the summer due to what's still going on with COVID, but we do we will meet on site and do outdoor checkups. We give away free hardware, so those hose nozzles and other, we have shower heads, we have aerators, we have kitchen nozzles. You can go to our offices to pick those up. I'll tell you a little more about that in a moment. We do a lot of outreach and education, which is why you're here today. And then we have some really great tools and resources. Our website, which is listed, is a great place for you to go and take a look at what we offer. Also, our Water Smart Yard website provides weekly watering recommendations for your landscape. And so that will really be helpful for you if you're new to this, because we changed, we adjust the weekly watering recommendations every week during the irrigation season based on the current weather conditions. And so you can look at, well, I have drip and I have, you know, low water use shrubs on drip, and how many minutes a week should I be watering them? Or maybe I have lawn and it's on sprays. How many minutes per week and how many days per week should I be watering that? And that can get a little tricky. So we actually do the math for you and all the technical calculations, and you can just go to our website or even give a call and get those weekly updates. And then very exciting news for you. If you've got a lawn and it's green and it's been watered and well maintained, particularly if you've been watering it last summer, and we can tease that out and see that you've been watering it. We have just enacted a drought special. It's doubled in the amount of rebate that we're going to give you right now to remove your lawn and put in a low water use landscape and convert your spray to drip. And instead of 75 cents a square foot, it's doubled. It's $1.50 a square foot. So if you haven't done this before and you're eligible, please, now is such a great time to do it. 1,000 square feet max, that's $1,500, up to $1,500 towards the cost of your project to convert your lawn, your high water use lawn, to a lovely low water use landscape. We also have an irrigation efficiency upgrade, and that's up to $100 per meter. Most folks have 1 meter in their home, and that's towards the cost of the materials to improve the efficiency of your irrigation system. This would be in an area separate from that cash for grass area. Both of these rebates, it's very important that you must be pre-qualified before you start the project. So you need to contact us before so we can help you determine if you can we can pre-qualify you on the phone, or we'll schedule a time to come out to your site and do a pre-inspection. You'll perform the project and comply with all of our rules and regs, and then we'll come out and do a post-inspection, and you'll get the rebate after you've finished the project. So make sure you check those details out on our website. You can click through and learn all about these programs, but I urge you to jump on this now if you think you might be eligible. And then finally, I wanted to just show you all the info that you need here, a screenshot of our website. You can call, you might want to write this phone number down. It's not on the slide. It's area code 707-543-3985, 707-543-3985. I can put that in the chat as well to call, or you can, oh, thank you, Serena. I see that just came up in the chat. And then you see the email down below, watersmart@srcity.org. And then go to our website, srcity.org/watersmart. You can click around here and learn all about our programs and the services that we offer for all of our Santa Rosa water customers. So thanks again for being here. I'm very excited to hear Oscar present, and we'll take it away.
Great, thanks so much for sharing all the ways that the City of Santa Rosa and tools that the City of Santa Rosa has to help conserve water. And I will go ahead and pull up Oscar's presentation.
Hi, Deb.
Hi, Oscar. How are you doing tonight?
Oh, fantastic. Thank you for that amazing presentation. I work for the city of Sausalito, and we are combining forces. How do we deal with what was inevitable? And so we're making adjustments as we go every day, and thinking that through these workshops and collaborations between community and nonprofits, things move quite fast. You know, we as government agency takes a little while, but hopefully we have a good vision and we have good people that are gonna come, you know, with a lot of energy to get a lot of things done right. So.
Terrific. Thank you for being here.
Oh, you're welcome.
All right, sorry about this. 1 second.
While we're waiting for the slides to come up, a great question came up in the question and answer box. Deb, if you'd like to take a minute to answer it. Haley asked, how do I report a bad leak that I observed at a housing complex?
Whoa, that's pretty good.
Yeah, I just put that, it's all of the short links that we have. We're srcity.org, and then there's a slash, and it's often the term of what you're trying to find. So srcity.org/water waste, srcity.org/save water, srcity.org/water smart. So these are different links, but that's where you can go to report water waste. And thank you so much for doing that.
All right, Oscar, I will turn it over to you now.
Well, thank you so much, every one of you. Thank you for making this afternoon special. We're gonna be going through what's a drip irrigation system. As we understand, we're in a serious drought and we're gonna be here for a while, but this is a great time to engage in getting to know all these elements that make our life way easier and also help us conserve as a community or beautiful resources like water. So what is a drip irrigation? Basically, a drip irrigation is a way to deliver water directly to a plant, a shrub, or a tree. It really helps conserve the water by avoiding waste, and is very inexpensive to install. That basically breaks down that for many years when we had a big allocation of water, we used to have sprayers that will spray over areas that had shrubbery, sometimes around trees and lawns. But basically, our conservation efforts have the industry to become more efficient. And given the fact that we live in a Mediterranean weather, we can begin to work with these new systems that they've been here for a while, but now they have become very available now at every place. So next slide, please. So what are the main parts of a drip system? Here's a picture just that I took on, pretty much going through what's an irrigation valve. There's one irrigation valve here at the bottom. You can take a look. It contains a filter, usually our water that comes from the city to our home comes very clean, but because the system of irrigation have small components, we don't want to clog those components. So it calls in to have a filter, inexpensive, but very functional filter. We also need a pressure reducer. The city has an amazing, puts a lot of energy to get water pressure into our homes. So when we're living a second story or a third story in an apartment complex, we can take a shower and have plenty of pressure. Well, the pressure comes at about maybe 60, 70, sometimes 100 pounds, which is a lot of pressure. And for our drip system to be able to work, we need to tape that pressure and bring it down to about 30 PSI, which means that we want to irrigate very slowly and profusely so it can really penetrate down into the ground. Next to it, we have drip line and connectors. There's several types of drip lines. The most common is a polyvinyl. It comes in a 1/2 inch, it comes at 5/8, and there's a 1/4 inch small ones. We also have emitters that can go along with the drip line system, staples, and very important at the end of our system, we need to have a flush end cap because we got to give maintenance to this system we're about to put together. And part of it is to maintain it once a year or twice a year after the rainy season, have it a good flush to be able to remove any contaminants or any lingering dust that could be there. So next slide, please. So here is a very cool picture. You get to see, kind of zoom in to the left-hand side of the screen. I have the emitters. These are commonly called bubblers. And they call bubblers because actually when water flows through it, it creates a little bubble or a drip. And they come in 1 and 2 gallons per hour. which means that when they're connected to a polyvinyl tubing at probably approximately 30 psi, which is, good enough pressure, within an hour of working, they will drop in about a gallon to 2 gallons, and then be able to give a specific water needs to that specific plant, shrub, or tree, depending on how long we want to manage the system. Next to it, we also have connectors, because we gotta connect sometimes from that bigger polyvinyl to a spaghetti line, which I'll show later in the next slides. But basically, these connectors are really easy to maneuver. We can actually use scissors and cut them. And we have teeth, connectors, and most importantly, a puncher and guff plugs, because sometimes we make mistakes in this polyvinyl piping. Even though it's inexpensive, we want to make sure we conserve resources. We have a way to fix our wrongs. On the right-hand side of the picture, you get to see the larger connectors. These are the most common commercial grade connectors we have in the market. When a system is laid outside into the ground, it receives a lot of UV light, which means UV light gives, a lot of damage to these parts and small plastic components. So they gotta be built very robust, and they have to also have a lot of kind of color matching, so you kind of know where your things are. The most common are the barb, which are to the right-hand side, which are kind of brown, and they go inside the polyvinyl tubing, and they allow you to connect pieces into T's, elbows, or sometimes connect one line to the next. You see the ones that are black and have a blue kind of ring at the end. These are more compressed. You have to use force to feed in the line and make sure it holds the polyvinyl in place. So these are kind of the most common components. You're gonna run into it and get used to it. It's a lot of fun. Like you can see, this is kind of our building blocks. Next slide, please. Now we're gonna be talking about a drip line. So a polyvinyl tubing, it's a pipe that comes in between 50 feet, 100 feet, 500 feet. This polyvinyl, it's very inexpensive, and it's kind of basically our hose distribution for water. And there's two types. We have a larger size, which is a 5/8 poly tubing that you can see on the left-hand side screen. Down there, you get to see a quarter. It's a good size polyvinyl tubing. On the right-hand side, you get to see an spaghetti line, which is a thinner, a smaller line at about a quarter of an inch. Now, even though this is kind of tiny and mighty, it can provide so much deliverance of water when it needed in areas like planters, veggie garden, raised beds. So this tiny, mighty spaghetti line can do a lot of good work, and not because it's small doesn't mean it's gonna not deliver what we want. Next slide, please.
Oscar, I have a question for you from Linda Price. She's asking, how can I tell what size line I already have so that I can buy more, assuming that she no longer has the packaging to be able to see?
Oh my God, great question. I run into those things all the time. Previous to the, years back, we used to carry a 1/2 inch polyvinyl and then the 5/8. So what I recommend, you can snap a little piece of that polytubing and bring it to an irrigation supplier and try to make it fit in a fitting. Now, those fittings that you may find, there were 1/2 inch or 5/8. So it's one of those. And if it's the small one, that will be an spaghetti that is a quarter of an inch. Thank you, Linda, for your question. That's a great question. So we explore some of those components that we use on our irrigation installation, but how it all functions and how it all kind of places together in our minds. If you live somewhere in a residential area or you live in a community place, I live in a condominium, so we share all of our green spaces with all of our neighbors. So we all kind of know where those irrigation supplies are because our kids kind of play around the area. So if you live at home, you probably know where your valves will be. To the left-hand side, it's an anti-siphon valve. It's basically one of the first components that your water will enter before it hits into your garden. And the way it works, water comes in through the piping, goes into the valve, And the valve has a solenoid, which means it works by electricity, which gets put together by a timer. Depending on how we time or program that timer is how this valve is automatically gonna open or close. Now, this valve also prevents any backflowing of water that has already been in the garden. So it actually functions as an anti-siphon valve as well. After our valve, it goes down to a filter and also pressure regulator that comes built in into one piece. Now that piece is essential. Again, as I mentioned, most of the irrigation, most of the water that comes to our homes comes at a higher PSI, pressure per square inch. Again, 60, 70, 100 sometimes. And we want our irrigation being able to come down in pressure so we can deliver a slow and steady water to our vegetarian areas. Then after that, it goes into a polyvinyl connector. And from there on, it's just polyvinyl tubing and emitters and a flush cap. Now, you see here, there's several types of pressure regulators. There's the very expensive ones that are the 30 PSIs. These ones are about $20. There's some cheaper versions, which are about $7. Same thing with some of the check valves and pressure reducers. There's a whole variance in price. So I want to make sure that when you go and look for these components, you're able to identify them at least for their name, and then kind of shop around and see what works for you for your specific home. Now, if you already have a timer at home, for example, a lawn area, and you want to convert the lawn, you can always reuse your irrigation timer that could be there. So here's two. Here's one portable, which is by Hunter. If you have an irrigation valve that is located way outside away from your house, you can operate it with batteries. So to the next slide, please. So here's, I want to spend a little bit more time speaking about the anti-siphon valve because it's such an important component because we want to avoid backflowing of water from the irrigation landscape into portable water at home. Now this anti-siphon valve, again, it works by a solenoid or sometimes can be manual, but it still prevents water from the garden to invariably come into our drinkable water. So, and why we want to protect our drinkable water, because sometimes when you have lawns, we tend to fertilize them. And we fertilize them, we use petrochemicals. And certain chemicals, if they go back into the line, can not just corrode our piping, but also we take them and ingest them. And also there could be herbicides and pesticides, but to the most part, we wanna make sure we have a good working anti-siphon valve for our project. Thank you. Next slide. Okay, and here's a familiar picture to me. This is what I see at work. I work for the city of Sausalito, and we maintain a lot of acreage of right-of-ways, walkways, and medians. And part of my surprise to me was we're in the year 2021, and we still have ineffective sprayers irrigating our public spaces. Now, this is non-common. You still see this in private properties, but I guess when you see runoff of water in the curb and basically not much irrigation, kind of lets you know that it's time to make the conversion, right? We need to stop avoiding the waste of water. We need to control our water in a better distribution way, which a drip system can allow us to do it, and also maximize efficiency. Again, putting a lot of water too fast, too quick doesn't really allow our irrigation water to really go down into the ground, to really feed our plants, even our lawns. So we need to slow down the pressure, and we need to maximize our efficient way to deliver specifically to a plant and to conserve our water. To be honest, it's time to do it now, and what a better opportunity to walk away today and have the idea to do that at home. Next slide, please. So here's the two types of drip irrigation that we work every day, and you will see in the market. We have inline emitters. This polyvinyl has a huge advantage. If you had a raised bed, or if you have an area that you like to farm, it's a very easy system because you can lay down the polyvinyl and it already comes with built-in emitters. That means you don't have to punch or measure and plug in a bubbler every so and so and so. It actually brings water distributed between 6 to 12 inches of space for the right amount of specification of that inline emitter. And if you like to grow your veggies, if you like to do things at home, this is one of the best systems that can actually provide you a lot of joy, because you get to see how it functions and how it delivers that precious water to your plants and your edibles. Also, you pay a little bit more price on it, but it's quite fun to have it. Now, if you ever want to if you have a larger landscape that you want to do that, I like to call this one the point source of irrigation. You use a solid polyvinyl, and you only bring water to the specific root zone of a plant, a shrub. It's very easy to install, very affordable, because it's just a solid line of polyvinyl tubing. And when you get close enough to the plant you want to irrigate, you can put a puncher and then drop in your bubbler, depending on the water needs of that specific plant. What happens on these, the two differences between the two, is that the point source irrigation, that's used and only brings water to that area that the plant needs it. On the other hand, in the inline emitters, it pretty much wets the area where the line is being put down. So you have to maximize also the water there. So if you cultivate, you gotta make sure you use the precious water. Next slide, please. So here's a good picture of how the system works. On the right-hand side, you see tomatoes, and they're at about 2 feet apart. So the drip line inline emitters, you get to see how beautiful it delivers the water alongside every foot or so. And that's the big benefit of an inline emitter, because if you have, again, agriculture space or you raise beds, it's a very way to bring water to those plants. Now, a point source is more definitely to a location and a specific plant. But nonetheless, those two systems combined can really provide a huge service to water conservation. Next slide, please.
I am going to interrupt here with a question about how often should you change your filter?
That's a great question. The inline filter that are on the market nowadays, they come in with a flusher screw cap. So actually, I will go and be curious and do it maybe twice a year. But if you have your system running between 5 months out of the year, we turn on irrigation in the past right about early May, and we turn it off usually around Halloween. So you have good irrigation for 5 months. So I will flush it twice a year, every couple of months. And that will get rid of any contaminant, any tiny plastics or rocks that could, provide malfunction to your emitter system. Good question. Thank you. So now we're getting to understand our parts of our irrigation system, all the mechanics. All these slides will be available for you guys to see. And now it comes to talking about plants and what plants need. And this is so important because part of not just the value of our human nature is to grow along with plants and trees and shrubs, but also to understand how nature really puts a value to our quality of life. And for that, I want to talk about hydrozones. This is so important because now shifting between sprinkler systems to drip lines, we have to understand how every plant, every tree has a specific needs of water and sun. So imagine this, you're sitting at your home, right? The south facing part of your home during the summer gets the hottest of the hottest, which means exposes the home to a lot of sunlight. Now, the north end of your house probably has a lot of shade, so not that many water needs on those plants, right? And to the east of your home and to the west is probably kind of not similar, but nonetheless a whole different microclimate. So a hydrozone, it's basically how do we group those plants with the water needs and the sun needs. And I can give you an example here. Native grasses and lavenders, and sages kind of live in the same family. They don't require a lot of water, but they need a little bit of water that could be put in together by a drip system. Now, if we have fruit trees, the fruit trees definitely need a more specific watering because the roots are deeper and they have more wider requirements because they're producing foliage and they're also producing fruit. So sometimes those trees, they need to be deep water. So they need to be in a different hydrozone, which means a different programming of time and run for that water to penetrate down into the roots. And same thing, a hydrozone for vegetable gardens. We don't grow veggies all year long, but definitely your corn and your squash and your beans definitely require a different time than any sages or any other trees. So next slide, please. So now we talked about all the parts in irrigation. We briefly touched base on the area within our home. It's time to make a plan of action. And that means we start with a map. Now, this is kind of the most cool thing to do. It's time involving and it may be frustrating at times, but this is your framework. This is where everything really meets. And it's gonna be in a way to plan how you're gonna assess what you have at home. And we start by making just an aerial picture of your home. You sit around, you measure what's your front yard, what's your backyard, what are your hydrozones, if you begin to ID the specific needs of your garden. Now, again, I'll repeat that again, the specific needs of water in your garden or in your home, because that tells us what type of irrigation, drip line, and volume of water we need to be running on those areas. And then number three, sorry, my Spanish comes too. We need to strategize of work, which means a drip line system, it's mostly about planning and thinking what technical supplies we need to get. But once you have a plan and a map, stick to it. Because 5 years from now, when you're digging through these areas and you want to plant more fruit trees, you're going to run into your existing drip line. And you're going to be frustrated that you don't know where this map is. So please, this map goes along the way and it will help you be less frustrated in the future if you keep a record on it. And then start making a material list. You can, once you take a measure on what you have, you can begin to think about your list and kind of keep it into that works for you. Next slide, please. So we now at this point, right, that we no longer see lawns being part of our landscape, given the water crisis that we are into. And the city of Santa Rosa has an amazing rebate program. So if you're interested on shifting your sprayer system of your lawn into a more ecological building landscape, this is the time to do it. So look at the opportunity at home when you see the browning on the grassy. What can I do? What's gonna be the next step that is gonna be sustainable, that is gonna empower me, that is gonna create a better habitat and provide me quality of life? And all these items actually can be put together by you and your friends and your family and really empower your community and your home to be more resilient and basically more conscious of the time we're living. And for that, keep in touch with Daily Acts because they'll have some workshops coming up next. Next slide, please. So imagine, I just want to play this on your head, guys, right? You have that browning lawn in your home and you're like, okay, I'm done with this lawn. How can I turn this sprinkler system lawn into a drip line system? Well, it's because a lot of people have done it. Many suppliers already come with kits. But one of the main things that we need to do is to be able to flag your sprinkler heads that you have in your lawn area. And then basically we go and dig out and cap each of them. And we only keep about one. That's gonna be your source of irrigation. And that source of irrigation is gonna have a filter and a pressure regulator. Again, when we use sprayers, we use a lot of pressure, a lot of flow water to disperse the water through the landscape. But irrigation is the whole way around. It needs to be slow flowing and it's slow to the ground. So it's a whole different view than what we are trained our eyes to do it. So part of it is to have a sprinkler to drip system. And those are very easy to get kits. I will put some, not just businesses, but local harvesters that may have them. And it's a really kind of a one-day project if you want to, And it's a good way to kind of assess what you have at home and kind of do those changes as you decide to do what you're gonna do next on your landscape. Next picture, please. All right. Now this is my favorite because you guys are used to this irrigation valve. So one thing that I do for about maybe 7 to 8 years is I used to maintain lawns in Marin County for quite some years. And somehow in between, I kind of, the way those lawns were designed, you had a lot of areas that were becoming browner and browner. So what I started doing, I started kind of losing those brown areas and shit mulch and add compost and add plants. So I end up kind of choking my grass area. So I have less to mow, right? So what I have to do, I have to come to terms and see spray those areas that I can connect a drip line system. And when we completely get rid of a lawn, there's an easy way also to go from the valve to a drip line system. And then number one thing is to ID where is your outlet on your anti-siphon valve, because that's the number. Let us know which way the water flows. So again, if we remember from the explanation early on, water comes up the line, goes through the solenoid, it opens and closes when we have a timer, and then comes down this way. And that's an area that we can connect a pressure regulator with a filter. Now, the filter is built in, which means we already receive reduction of pressure and a filtration system. From there on, we can connect a polyvinyl, and then we're ready to go. So again, it's a very easy system, very affordable. I mean, some of the parts here, I can tell you that the most expensive part could be the valve itself. Now, if you have existing valves and you're not quite sure if they're up to date, there's some good brands out there that can give you 15 to 20 years of service. And I recommend to kind of, think about, okay, if I'm going to invest my time, maybe it's time also to replace those anti-siphon valves. If not, just replace the sprinkler system by just putting a filter, pressure reducer into one piece, your connector, and you're good to go. Next slide, please. Okay, and this brings us to our next slide, which is how to set our drip system installation. This is the funnest of all funnest part. You may require to have collaboratively effort, which means if you have a spouse, your kids, your community, your neighbor, this is a good time to call them in and help you out, because sometimes those rolls of drip line are kind of quite heavy. And if you were thinking you're gonna put down a drip line to your front of your house, you may be talking about putting down 200 linear feet of drip, and you may require somebody else to help you unroll the drip line. So as you begin to unroll the drip line, you're gonna start using landscaping staples. Now, those staples are with a round top. And the reason that the round top is you don't wanna squeeze the polyvinyl tubing when you're unrolling them or when you're installing them, because plastic in a way has a memory. And if you constrict the flow of that water, it can really affect how you deliver water to your system. You want to make sure your pipe is unrolling evenly and without any effort. And as you use your staples, you just gotta make sure they go soft to the ground. Maybe give it a pound or so to keep them into place every 2 feet or so. Then the next thing you have to think about, it's once you get to your plant, you gotta decide what are the water needs of that plant. If you go to nurseries, I love going to Devil Mountain Nursery in Petaluma. They have amazing assortment of plants, drought tolerant and native, and they even come with some water use. So you get to kind of think about how much water this plant is gonna need when it's new, and also kind of think about your size of bubblers that you're gonna be putting on each. And once you decide what water requirement goes to that specific plant or fruit tree, then you use your puncture, make a hole, and then place in your bubbler. And what you gotta do is come to the end of your polyvinyl line, and at the end, install an end cap or a flush line device. That's important again, because maybe at the very end of the year, we gotta do a last flush to remove all the gunk that gets stuck in the line. It gets hot and humid. So sometimes you get to build even a little bit of algae on those systems that can plug the gopher. No, not the gophers, the bubblers. So you gotta make sure you flush the system at the end of its service and then back again before spring service. So have that, yeah.
This is a great chance to ask one of the questions that came up, which is, how exactly do you flush a line? Do you mind walking us through the process of flushing a line?
Absolutely. That's a great question. There's actually, I will recommend to also on your map, remember that map that you made that you're thinking about making? Well, in that map, you have your valves, you put your drip line where you want it to go, and then you make a mark where is your end of your drip line system. And for that, sometimes they have tiny little boxes that you can put on, and that tiny little box of irrigation, it costs about $6 to $7. It sticks up off the ground, and then you know where you end cap. So you go there, you take it out, you unscrew the cap, and then you turn on your drip line via manually, or you can use your program controller and just let it run for not even 2 minutes. I mean, a minute is more than enough to get all the stuff out, but 2 minutes will be good enough. And then turn it off, put the cap on, put it back in its box. Then you know that it's in a secure place when you need it to use. So IDing and making a good plan can really make your garden be very efficient for all this installation and the maintenance of your drip line. So, and don't forget to program your controller. Now you're gonna be using more longer times of irrigation because we're making less water flow through the polyvinyl tubing. So we need to adjust our timers. Yes. Next slide, please. All right. So I do work with landscape, and water is an important resource as well as soils. And I just want to spend a little bit of time on this with you guys because without understanding the quality, the quantity, and the needs of our soil, any irrigation system you're gonna put out there, no matter if it costs you $100 or $500, is not gonna get you the most amount of service that you need. So what I want to express here is that I hope this combination between soil, living soil, and an effective irrigation system will marry or begin the invitation for you to explore more on it. And for that, I'm just gonna introduce you a little bit on what type of soils are out there. Sonoma County has two types of soils that are very frequent. You have alluvial soils, which means when the volcanoes eroded, they brought in all this amazing sediment that sits in the Laguna Plateau. So this is kind of an amazing agricultural type of soil, but also you run into clay soils. When you're in the coast, you run into more sandy soils, and the silt sometimes is kind of in between. And also there's other growing mediums. For example, what you can encounter in pots or in raised beds, right? What you have in your pot is potting soil, which is not necessarily clay or sand or silt. It may have some of that, but it's mostly medium. And sometimes when we have raised beds, like or veggie beds, right? We always amend them with organic vegetable compost. So all of that is a lot of organic matter and it's less sand, clay, and silt. So here's a quick video. It's only a few minutes, but what do you think, Annie? Should we introduce it?
Sorry, let's keep on going. I want to make sure we have plenty of time for question and answer because people are having such thoughtful questions for you that I know will be a really fun discussion at the end.
Yeah, okay, cool. You let me know on time. I can really, I can run. It's a short, just quick presentation on the soils, but I think they really piece together the irrigation efficiency. So if we move to the next slide, that'll be fine with me. Thank you, honey.
Oops. And also, I will be sending a follow-up email with resources. And if we don't have a chance to watch this video, I'll make sure I include the video in the follow-up resources.
All right. Thank you, Annie. Here's one of our favorite soils we have here in Sonoma County and through Marine, clay. And clay, how water and clay actually marry together, where Water moves very slowly to clay. Clay has an amazing value of retention of water once it gets wet. So what we do when we use a drip line irrigation, we have to think about using a very low flow emitters, which means instead of having the 2 gallons per hour, we can use a 1 gallon per hour and then double our time to allow slowly percolation of that precious water into the clay soil. And also, because clay holds so much water, we don't need to irrigate as often. So maybe having 3 days in between or now, which is about a week, which is sounds pretty much good for clay, right? You don't want to overdo your clay because it creates anaerobic conditions and actually you can root kill your plants. So you need to irrigate less when you have clay soil. You need to make sure your flow of drip is nice and slow. And you have to understand that once it's wet, it's gonna take a long time for it to dry. Next slide, please. So what happens if we have a sandy soil? Well, if you have an irrigation system working on a sandy soil, the water will flow through that sandy soil quite very quickly, which means we will pretty much be losing our water and our amazing moisture in our soil. So what does that mean if we have a drip line system and we have sandy soil conditions? So we need to irrigate more frequently, maybe and for short amount of times, which means maybe this is a time that we need to water with 2 gallons per hour and maybe do half hour and then program again for another half hour in 3 hours from that day. So kind of split that water in so you don't just lose all your precious water down to nowhere and you actually got to deliver it at the root zone. So what I mean about the root zone, it's a great question. The most activity in bacteria and microorganisms are within the first 6 inches of your soil, any type of soil, which means that's kind of where you want to keep the water available to plants, right? That's where you want your drip line to be slow and bringing that water down into the infiltration of that zone. And if you have sandy soil, you can drop in a gallon, stop, let it go, and then 2 hours later, you drop in another gallon instead of having 2 gallons at once. So that will be my consideration when dealing with sandy soil. Next slide, please. And then there's in between, right? There's no just black and white. There's the in between. And silty soil, it's there's an amazing story about silty soil that many of our cultures throughout the world they start agriculture because they live next to banks of sand, next to the rivers, and it was not necessarily sand; it was silty soil, which means all this organic matter just flow around the rivers and actually provide tons of nutrients. So it holds water beautifully, better than sandy soils. The fertility of silty soil is amazing. The only bad thing is that it erodes quite easy if you don't have the right irrigation, which means if you use overspray, your silty soil will be running away from it. So when you have silty soil, you wanna protect it. You wanna make sure your drip line system is kind of that in between, not too fast, not too short, but steady. And then protect your amazing silty soil from eroding. Next slide, please. And here's one big example. I live in a small backyard and I have raised beds. And my raised beds are made of medium, which is between potting soil, existing native soil, and compost. And I grow vegetables at home with my kids. So I have a medium, right? It's nothing in between clay or sandy or anything like that. We have just an amazing medium to grow. And this is particularly something very interesting to me because when we have plants in the landscape, we kind of don't go and see how they're doing with water needs, right? But if we have our veggie beds and we have a pots plants, we always checking on them. So it's actually where they are located that we keep our eyes on it, right? And that's what I want to let you know that for that, it's gonna take you, the person putting the irrigation system, to observe and adjust for overwatering. Most of the time, if you want to go ahead and slow provide that water and that infiltration at a nice low rate, so all the proficiency of the water goes everywhere. And that's, again, speed is the main key for irrigation. You want slow and steady. So next slide, please. And again, to wrap up this, almost getting close to my point here. When we irrigate, we're providing water, right? We're providing water, which is an incredible element. But we need to nourish also our root system, and we need to nourish our soil. And we gotta make sure that water that we just put into the ground really conserves its moisture, right? It provides an amazing benefit to our plants, to our veggies, to our community, right? Even to our lawns. So using a compost bedding, I try to do it once every 2 years, but I provide about an inch or so of compost through my garden beds, through our community gardens here as well. We provide that to shrubberies. So when the irrigation system goes on, or when it rains, all these nice um, elements in the compost become available to our plants. And on top of that, we put a layer of 2 to 3 inches of mulch. Um, and I will go in a little bit on mulch when we come to the slide. But this mulch is in fact what it will eventually provide at this layer of protection from losing too much water to evaporation. Plants evapotranspirate, right? They're losing constantly water. But if also the soil where we put in this water, if we don't have a layer of protection, the water just evaporates. So allowing yourself to provide compost and mulch and nourish the soil with an effective drip line system, you're gonna be golden. You're gonna be in the right way of providing beauty and sustainability for your garden. Next picture, please. And where do we find mulch and compost? Well, my relationship working with in the private public entity is that we deal with many contractors. And arborist mulch is one of the best mulch available, and it's free. If you can connect with a company, local company, if you prefer, that does trimming of healthy trees. There's wood chips, and I will talk about them right now. But the mulch that comes from arborists, qualified arborists, it comes from pruning healthy trees. And pretty much a tree it's all these minerals, it's all these living entities that have been shredded, right? And those nutrients became available eventually once the mulch begins to break down with the compost, and that will fertilize the existing soil where the drip line is. So it's actually we're providing nourishment and we're recycling amazing nutrients to our soil. Now, if you have wood chips, on the other hand, wood chips can work, but you're not providing any nutritious value to the soil. You're only providing a layer of carbon. When mulch, it's everything, the leafage, the small branches, and when I'm speaking, it's just nutrients to the soil. Most of the mulch and compost that we use in between Sonoma and Marin County come from Grab and Grow or West Marin Compost. Both of them are located. If you have a truck, you can go and pick them up, or you can call one of your friends who has a truck and go and check out these places. You'll learn so much about what could be helpful once you put your irrigation into place, and also how you can nourish your soil. Because once you have those two things, you're gonna be in a very good place. Next slide, please. And lastly, here I wanna talk about our water budget. Just like now with our mandatory, let's see it this way. Understanding now that we're sharing this community effort, right, to provide the best available resource, which is water, to each of our locations, we need to budgetize how much water we want to use during what time of the year. So number one, I want you to think about the need of each of your hydrozone at home, right? Those areas that are located within your home, what's the water need of those plants during that time of the summertime that we use them? And also think long term, the water budget based on a seasonal evapotranspiration. Now, during spring and summer, we have the same amount of light, correct? We have the same amount of, not necessarily moisture, because our spring gets pretty wet. We get some rain in between March and April, right? But fall, it's pretty dry. We want to continue watering our plants, given the fact that we're living in a fire. I mean, it's time of fire, of wildfires, and part of having a strong plants, a strong shrub, and a strong trees is to make sure their soil is moist during those times. And part of that, again, is creating the budget. When do I need the most amount of water, which is during the summertime? Allocate yourself, plan and program your program timer, and be able to move around things. Again, observe and adjust. But most of what you're gonna be encountering once you start doing this project is that you are in control, all right? You can get all the information you can online. There's some resources and books, but everything you're gonna be learning is because you're gonna be on the ground doing it yourself. And that's one of the best empowerments you'll do to yourself, understanding that you can make the change and you'll make it happen. And if not, you will be able to adjust it, and we will be able to provide you help when it comes to that. And we have one last slide, I believe so. And yes, and that one talks about what places do we have in town that can help us find irrigation parts, going from our bubblers or connectors or drip lines or spaghettis and stay quiet irrigation supply, water savers in Petaluma. We have Freedman's as well, Horizon Distributors, Site One Landscape Supply, or local hardware stores, and Harmony Farm Supply. Any of these places will make sure when you walk in, you ask somebody that can direct you to the irrigation supplies, because sometimes it can be overwhelmed. And probably the person has some training in between and can give you an idea. And if you can bring your map at that time where your technicalities kind of written down how much material you need, what is your idea, they'll be able to help you get the right materials. And with that, I want to say thank you. Again, I feel honored to be working and partnering with City of Santa Rosa and Daily Axe, because this is it's a good time to do the project. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you so much, Oscar. What a wonderful presentation, and you do have a lot of questions. So I'm going to go ahead and bring some of those up. One question that came up twice was, should the drip line be placed above the compost but below the mulch? And then another person asks, this may be obvious, but the irrigation line needs to be under the material. So there are a couple of people that have questions around where the irrigation line should be placed.
Yeah, this is great, guys, because that means you guys are thinking, right? It's like, okay, I'm putting all this effort. I want to see my drip line irrigation. Remember that map that we're gonna be making, right? The map is gonna guide us where our irrigation line. Now, UV light, it's a very strong light and actually can eat away these components. But one thing that is important, that as we add compost, compost begins to deteriorate and it also breaks down the mulch. So every year we have to add an ongoing mulch layer, right? Between 2 to 3 inches. So you can cover that polyvinyl line with a nice mulch, and next year you're gonna have to cover it again. So ideally you want it to run right alongside the soil, right? And when you amend compost, you add about an inch, and then you mulch. But every once in a while will be good to kind of check your map. And if it's buried too much, just bring it up a little bit and cover it with the next year's mulch. And that will beautify your garden, provide nutrients, and protect that polyvinyl line. So right in between the mulch and the compost, I will say, it's a good in between.
Thank you, Oscar. We also have questions around how close to the tree trunk should an emitter be? And how old should a tree be when it finds its own water and can tap into the water table?
Oh my God, that's it's like the question how your kids are gonna leave home, right? Now, a good rule of thumb is to think about a tree and look at its let's see, when we have a small tree, imagine you go to Harmony and it's your birthday, right? And you buy a tree for yourself, and you go home and be like, oh, I have this 5-gallon plant, right? And you look at the canopy of this tree, and it may be a fig, it could be also a persimmon, it could be a lemon tree. So you look about the canopy of the tree, and that's basically the amount of root space that you want to cover with a drip line. And because that tree came in a 5-gallon plant, it's pretty young, you want to make sure you give sustenance to that tree for at least the first 3 to 5 years. Now, depending where you live, of course, but usually in areas where you have a good soil and you have good practices on building that soil, it'll be very effective for that tree to be irrigated for the first 3 to 5 years, and then you start cutting back the water, and it'll be able to find its water. So 3 to 5 years, it's a good zone. And but basically take away the canopy size of that tree, and then just loop around a nice drip line, which you can use a 1/4 inch drip, or you can use the 5/8 around, make a nice circle. So
Great, thank you. And another question related to fruit trees. Diane says she has a 30-tree orchard that is 4 years old and is in sandy soil. Until this year, she's been doing overhead watering.
Mhm.
This year, she's watering by hose and by hand, and the water absorbs quickly into the soil.
yes.
She's asking, why should I install drip? And if so, how many gallons does each tree require? She had heard that trees require about 16 gallons a day and was just wondering and wanted more information about that.
Yeah, that's a very specific question for the location. Understanding she's on it because she knows. So we want it slow and not too long of a watering. You want periods of watering in which you go and stop. So you have to think about that. A good way to when you have an orchard and as an organic farming background, when we amended with compost and mulch, we changed completely our watering because the mulch and the compost provide such a great moisture content that we need to water not so frequently. And then we water quite deeply, but again, that was clay soil. Now she's in a sandy side, so amend it with compost, mulch it, and then kind of take that in between variation of what it's there. If your trees are about 3 years and they take about 16 gallons, that's maybe a little bit too much. Maybe you go 5 gallons and then observe and adjust. The science is on your hands and your observation. And but good practices of organic farming will help you a long way to sustain better use of your water and quality of your soil. So I hope that's helpful.
Perfect, thank you. And we also have questions about, Philip is asking, on a 5/8 inch line, what's the maximum number of 2 gallon per hour emitters?
Emitter. All right. So that's a great question. Depend. I have installations in which I don't go past 200 feet just because that 100 feet pushes it and 200 is more than enough. And you're talking about having plants every 3 to 5 feet. Because again, planning for these plants, you think about how they're gonna get when they become adults, or they become at a right size. So thinking about that, you're gonna be using 100 feet of polyvinyl tubing, and you're gonna be planting 60 plants. It may be at the right location, you can put 60 emitters in 100 feet of polyvinyl. And that will be enough time for that irrigation to run. But again, you got to do your math. You got to put your pressure reducer and think about that you want the water to go profusely at a slow speed and really penetrating where you want it to go into that root zone. So sometimes if you have a long extension, you may have to add another valve so you can run the other 100 feet depending on the deliverance. And you can do a test, take a bowl, put it underneath that drip line and see it working for an hour. See if you collect what the manufacturer is telling you. If not, adjust to it. Again, manufacturers only have a way to sell you a product, but it really comes to you being critical and be like, okay, how much is in reality am I getting? And then adjust to that. Thank you.
We have a couple of questions that are about that raised garden bed that you showed in the photo. Diana is asking, in raised bed vegetable gardens, how do you select size of emitters? And we also have a question about what type of soil you use to fill your raised garden beds.
Yes. Number one, understanding your medium you're growing. We collected the existing soil that we had here. We dig out some plants and I amended. I'm in the more silty area. I'm next to a creek, Atascadero Creek. So think that over thousands of years, all these sediments pretty much came to the creek and overflowed it. So we'll actually, it's very sandy at times. We lose a lot of water quite quite fast. So I amended with organic compost and slowly but surely build it. I had some potting soil, I put it in there, amended, and since then what I do, I have an okay medium. It requires quite more watering because plants are growing. When you have a vegetable garden, you have to be making sure that you don't skip days on watering because you don't want plants to be stressing. You want plants to be growing. And this is part of that irrigation is so effective. When you have a drip line system connected to a timer on a raised bed, you can walk away and tend and enjoy your garden. You don't have to water them because plants, in a way, the more uh, the more steady temperature is, the more steady moisture is, the more they are happy and the more they want to grow. When it suddenly gets too hot and they wilt and there's no moisture, then they're stressed and they don't want to come back and prop up. They may next day get water and be like, okay, I'm here, but they're constantly on that stress. And you want to de-stress and provide that certainty of water with an irrigation system. Polyvinyl tubing is great for veggie beds. You could use a quarter of an inch. It's least expensive. From a 5/8 polyvinyl, put in a connector, and then you can run a 5-foot line, and you can have that run every foot or so. And once you turn on the system, then you know where you're gonna be growing. You can grow carrots next to lettuces. And again, it's the hydrozones that you need to have in order to grow the veggies that you want to get. So.
Great. And then in relation to those raised garden beds, Leslie is asking, is straw a good thing to use in the garden as a top layer to help prevent moisture loss and help keep weeds down?
Absolutely. I will say cardboard. One of the things that I do love about shit mulching and mulch and things that are free, right? You don't have to buy them. You just go to the store and there's tons of good boxes and you can call Bar Electric Service or any company that you work with and they bring you free mulch. And it's like, I'm golden here. I have a free cardboard and I have free mulch and I just put my irrigation and I'm in good shape. Same thing happens when you have a straw. If whatever is accessible to you that you can use it to prevent that evaporation is always great. It could be straw. Sometimes I use cardboard and mulch. Sometimes if there's no mulch, I use wood chips. It depends on the area, but always use your local resources first. Make phone calls, figure out who has straw, figure it out who has free wood chips drop off. And when it comes to cardboard, the cardboard that I try to use to mitigate weeds, it basically doesn't have any wax. You want to make sure you have a solid piece of cardboard that doesn't have much stains on it. It's pretty clean, and then you're good to go. Yeah.
And I'll add that for my vegetable gardens, I really do enjoy using rice straw. Rice straw is wonderful because you don't end up seeing much weed germination in your space and it helps keep the soil compacted.
Yeah, so that's my son. He's coming to check with that. But no, guys, I mean, if anything, your questions are really helping me a lot to make this presentation better. I mean, one of these days we gotta get together and do a workshop, and we have a raised bed, and we'll do the math, and we have you guys put in the polyvinyl tubing and adding and taking, because it's only hands-on and through your participation lively that what you guys are gonna do, right? But I'm glad that you guys are asking already involved on making those changes. It's so we're a community. We're just practicing best practices. And if you have a neighbor who's excited about helping you, take them on it. Take them on it because they're gonna learn so much. You're gonna get to know them more, and it's gonna be a joint venture. A joint venture. And we need community at these times. Don't take all this to yourself. Bring a buddy. Have fun with it.
We also have a question about those inline drip emitters that you showed.
Mm-hmm.
Do those get clogged? And
they do, yeah. The filter, as you know, somebody made a question. I think it was you about how often do we flush the filter. I show that those filters are very affordable, and we need to give them maintenance. So if you're growing vegetables at home and you have your polyvinyl tubing with a built-in emitters, you can always flush them every 2 to 3 weeks just to make sure nothing that is there, nothing is gonna pass the filter. but it can always be an obstacle for the water flow. So, and it's also a good way just to check your system. We tend to have a saying in my department that we just plant a tree and go away. Same thing with irrigation. You don't just lay down a system and go away. You have to maintain it, be familiar with it, and practice maintenance. And I think that's one of the key that makes a system be successful. Understand its basics, adapt to it, and see how it works for you. And deconstruct it if you want. Parts, again, are very affordable. Don't be wasteful, of course, but play around. And if your neighbor takes you on doing their landscape, go ahead and do it. Play in their landscape. You'll become a master to it. And then you go along and be helping other people doing it.
So I have a question from Elizabeth here. And she wants to remove a grass strip between the street and sidewalk. Can we simply let the grass go brown and cover with mulch? And I think this question, if it's in regards to the rebate, maybe Deb could provide more information on the process if that is something that would be subject to a rebate.
Sure, I'd be happy to talk about that. Yes, so as I said, make sure and contact us first if you want to get the rebate, because we want to make sure and pre-qualify you so you do get it. And there's some, a few hoops you have to jump through around that, and without going into the detail. And then, assuming that you are, or even if this isn't about a rebate, you can absolutely let your strips go brown. Except if you've got trees in those strips, I mean, none of us here are actually certified arborists, right? So I always qualify that with letting people know to make sure that you understand whether your trees can survive if they're getting irrigation from a system, because if you're just going to let everything go brown, you're going to stop watering. And trees are very intelligent and they'll search water out, but yet there are many trees that are have fairly surface roots, and they get dependent on that supplemental irrigation. So be careful with just stopping to irrigate the strips if you're drying them out when you have plant material you want to keep alive in there and make sure they do well, particularly trees. But yeah, you can let them go brown. I love and have, rebated countless projects where they have done cardboard sheet mulching and just let them brown out and put mulch on top. I can think of, Oliver's Market, Stony Point Road did that many years ago. I can think of examples all over the place where, it's not an area that you're not using, right? So it's an easy area, and it's very tough to irrigate these narrow strips efficiently. So, or permeable hardscape's a great way to go with these strips too, if you want to use it for being able to step out of your cars and just have something permeable like decomposed granite or some other kind of permeable surface like that.
All right, great question there. We had a question about is there an easy way to place an emitter in the drip line? It can be kind of exhausting to find the hand strength to place a lot of emitters. And we're wondering, Oscar, if you have any tips and tricks around placing those emitters.
Yeah, well, two things, right? It's polyvinyl. So during the morning, it's tough. It's kind of hard. In the middle of the day, it gets very maneuverable. And that's when it's tougher actually to make a hole, because the plastic becomes very elastic, almost like you're trying to put a hole and it bounces back. So actually it works for me better to do the drip line punching in the morning when the line is still cold and hard, because it's an easy punch, just go, and then you punch your emitter. I use pliers after putting probably 60 to 70 bubblers. You get tired, so I shift between using pliers, and that's the way for me actually. So try to do it in the morning. If you're trying to do irrigation during a hot day, please, you're gonna be frustrated, because again, those plastics, they just resist. They don't want to be punctured, so they'll flex. And then just wait for the right conditions. Put it up for the next day when it's nice and cold, or in the morning, and the puncture will go right in it. So that's my only suggestion. To don't fight the plastic.
We've also used these little poker tools. Well, they are usually bright orange, so you don't lose them when you're working in your project site, to poke a hole, and then that can help you then place the the emitter in that hole that you poked. It can be tiring though.
Yeah, it's again, invite your friend or your neighbor or your boyfriend, your girlfriend, bring the whole town. Somebody will learn something. Because again, it's just a community effort. I cannot tell you how many things I misplaced. I put emitter backwards, how many connectors didn't got connected right. And then I'm driving home and I got this call. And you just learn and just go along with it. If they didn't come the right time, they didn't show up right at the first time, it's because it's a complex project, but it's got basics. And once you maneuver those basics, you'll be able, oh, okay, let me remove this hole. Let me put a goof plug. And then I move my connector here. And that's kind of the way we're gonna get through it. Again, you're mapping and planning the materials that you're gonna be using is very easy. Keep that map next to your irrigation controller, because again, when you plan next year or when you're gonna be mulching or you're gonna be adding a new ground cover, then you're gonna be thinking, oh my God, it's the line here. And then you just go to your visual, kind of understand where you are, and then you're like, okay, cool, I'm here. I see the line, and then you move on. But yes, always keep those records. They'll save you a lot of headaches.
We had one participant asking about where you can find free mulch or other supplies, and another participant answered that question. I just wanted to share that Nextdoor is what they listed as a great resource, a great
Awesome.
resource. So if you're looking for free mulch, that could be a place where you could connect with somebody who has an abundance of it to give away.
Yeah, no, that's great, guys. Share all your information. You guys are, or I can tell you're a very attentive community. You guys are coming to get a substance of knowledge. I mean, it's an in-between. Climate change is a big driving force. We shouldn't be panicking. We should be acting. We should be being hopeful about the future is really good, but also getting active on making these changes is really gonna make us be very resilient for what comes next. Another source I wanted to share with you guys too, about mulch. If you ever wanna go to West Marine Compost, they have a vineyard mulch. And that vineyard mulch is so good because it's already the breaking down of the compost that didn't make it through the small particles. And that basically you put that on top of your mulch and you got guarantee of fertilization for years to come. And it's pretty affordable, $18 to $20 per cubic yard. And again, it's getting your hands on it, be proud of your project and grow with it. Just learn how to grow with it.
So we are coming to the end of our webinar, and there were so many great questions and comments. And if we didn't get a chance to address your questions and comments, I will be sending a follow-up email that has this recording as a resource, as well as any additional resources and some follow-up to be able to answer those remaining questions that we didn't have a chance to answer tonight. So I want to thank you all for your participation. It is such a joy to be part of this learning community and to see your comments and really just see the engagement around this topic. And a huge thanks to the City of Santa Rosa and to Oscar tonight. So much gratitude for everybody that took an hour and a half out of their evening to join us here for this presentation. And please do look to the other two presentations that we will be hosting as well on the topic of sheet mulching and rain barrels. And you can find out more about those on the City of Santa Rosa's website. And I'll also include more information about those in the follow-up email. So just thank you, everyone. It's so wonderful to be part of this. And we wish you all a wonderful evening.
Bye, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.